What up, guys? Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you yet again another Game of Thrones episode review right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly. As always, I'm here to bring you this week's review for the latest Game of Thrones episode. So, I'll just get right into the review now. Well, before I get right into the review, if I don't come off as too enthusiastic or, oh shit about this episode, it's because I actually took some time off camera to nerd rage about what happened in this episode. Who knows, that flame might be lit by the time I get through this review, so just bear with me. But, okay, so I believe this is episode 5, which I actually got the title for this one, apparently entitled The Wolf and the Lion. What could that mean? So, okay, one thing I must note about this episode that is going to make this review a little bit different. The fact that 2 of the major settings that have been in every episode until this week's episode weren't shown this week. That's the Wall and that's the Dothraki Horde. Both those settings with both those groups, we didn't even see in this week's episode. Most of the story took place in King's Landing. So, usually I would do my review based off of setting, where I would go, bounce around the map, and then I'd cover all the events that took place at that setting in this week's episode. Instead, I'm going to use characters to construct this week's review. So guys, like I said, just bear with me. But that's what I'm going to do. Instead of the settings, I'm going to use characters. Alright, so let's get into this week's review. Now, in the interest of entertainment and in the interest of structure for this review, I'm going to go ahead and save the big 3 characters that I want to discuss this week, which are Ned Stark, King Robert, and Queen Cersei. I'm going to save them for last. So let's see, where's a good... Okay, let's start at the tournament. I think that's a fair enough place to start. So, okay, we saw in last week's episode that Sir Hugh, I finally remember his name, Sir Hugh, who was he was Jon Arryn's squire, and apparently he was I want to say he was a Knight of the Vale, I believe that's what they called him. He was murdered in last week's episode because he competed in the tournament, he competed in the joust against the Hound's older brother. And, he wound up getting a splendid lance to the throat. So he died in last week's episode. Now, in this week's episode, it opened up with Ned finding out that apparently Sir Hugh was jousting with new armor. He was wearing new armor. Now, that's suspicious because as immediately when we learn that information, we immediately think, haha, sabotage. Like I said in last week's review, that had to be a setup. And of course, now we know how. Fucking armor was sabotaged. Okay, so, let's see. Also at the tournament, we got introduced to Lawrence Tyrell, who is they called him the Knight of Flowers. A pretty boy. I'll just say pretty boy and leave it at that. But he's a pretty boy, pretty noble, who apparently has a lot of loot. As we learn later in the episode, he reveals in his conversation with who I believe is King Robert's younger brother. Sir Tyrell has a lot of loot. But anyway, so we get introduced to him, and pretty much he wins in the joust against the Hound's brother. Matter of fact, he knocks his horse over, falls on top of the rail, the guardrail, and it's and then of course the Hound's brother tries to kill him, and the Hound jumps in and he protects him. So I thought the reason why I'm bringing this up, I know it was only one scene and it was the opening scene of the episode, but I think we saw some shred of humanity in the Hound. Before this episode, he was introduced to us as just another brute, and he was like this silent guardsman figure. But with this episode, with that one scene, him, standing up to his brother the way he did, we kind of see that, hey, there might be a soul in there. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Now, okay, so that's how we started it off. So let's talk about two characters I want to mention right quick. To keep this review going. Littlefinger and I believe his name was Lord Varys, the bald-headed large fellow. Those two characters had a pretty good discussion in the throne room. I want to say about halfway through the episode, and I wasn't able to catch everything they were talking about, but this is all we need to take away from that conversation, if nothing else. We need to know this much. Both of them have been keeping eyes on Lord Stark, and both of them have their ulterior motives for aiding Lord Stark any way they choose to, any way they see fit. We already know that Littlefinger, he's been helping Lord Stark since last week. We knew that, and he continues to do that this week, which I'll get to towards the end of the review, because that was the big woo for this week. But Lord Varys, I think, is definitely worth mentioning because he has a conversation with Lord Stark, and that's when he reveals to him. He lets him know, hey, the Queen isn't the only one who's been keeping an eye out on you. I have too. And, and I hear things and whatnot. He is the one who actually reveals to Ned that the substance in which Jon Arryn was murdered. He said that the poison that was used is as clear and as tasteless as water, and it's undetectable. Now, I can't help but think, I mean, yes, he's a very, an educated man. He's a very intelligent individual. But how would he know this information? Like, I'm sorry, but, I find myself, the more I watch this series, the more I dwell into this, I can't help but get to the point where I can't trust any of the characters outside of the Starks. Now, yeah, I do have a biased perception. Why? Because from the premiere, from the pilot episode, we're introduced into the story through the perspective of the Starks. So we kind of, we kind of cling to them. All these other characters, they feel like outsiders, just as the Starks are, they're outsiders in King's Landing. I feel the same way. It's like all these other characters feels like outsiders, so I don't know who to trust. And, like I said it in last week's review, all these characters have ulterior motives. It's just a matter of time before, what you keep in the dark comes to the light. So we'll find out. But another thing that's worth mentioning about Lord Varys and Littlefinger's conversation is the fact that they seem to be rivals. I'm not talking about enemies. They may not necessarily be enemies, but they do appear to be rivals of some sort, whether it's in a political sense, whether it's in an intellectual sense. They seem like, the two old guys you'd see in the home playing chess against each other all the time. That's what it feels like. It feels like they're constantly playing a game of chess against each other, which I like that. Why? Because it's showing us the tension between these two characters. It's letting us know that, hey, there is tension here. Don't forget about it. Just put it in your memory bank, because we're going to come back to this, and I have a feeling that we will. Okay, so let's see. Who else is let's see, who else do we have to talk about before we get to the big three that I mentioned earlier? Trying to cover all my characters right quick. Like I said, King Robert's younger brother and Sir Tyrell, that whole little conversation. I'm not really interested in talking about that. Arya chasing a damn cat overhears a conversation between these two gentlemen about the Starks and the Lannisters. And she fears for her father's life now. I have to mention that one of the gentlemen that she overheard was the fellow from the pilot episode who was with make sure I pronounce his name correctly, Daenerys, the Targaryen prince. That was the guy that he was, chatting it up with at Daenerys and Khal Drogo's wedding. Yep. So he's in King's Landing. I just thought that was worth mentioning. Let's see. And what else? I think that might cover it before I jump into the other big characters. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to move this review over to what's been going on with Lady Stark, Tyrion, since the end of last week's episode, because that was the cliffhanger from last week's episode when Tyrion was seized, and Lady Stark has him as her prisoner. Now, they've been traveling, and one thing to note, Tyrion noticed that they were not heading towards Winterfell, that they were heading towards King's Landing. Well, actually, I don't know. Correction. He said he made a note that they were on the King's Road, but that doesn't necessarily mean they were heading towards King's Landing before they got attacked. He just said that they're on the King's Road. So he knew they weren't heading to Winterfell, which is also worth mentioning because he applauded Lady Stark. He said, "Oh, you announced that you were going to back to Winterfell in front of everyone else. So now everyone thinks that we're actually heading toward Winterfell when in fact we're heading somewhere else." Come to find out that apparently they were heading towards, I believe the place is called Eyrie, appropriately titled, which I believe, don't crucify me for this, I'm just trying to remember from a map that one of my viewers sent me. I believe that's in the east. I believe so. The only reason why I'm saying that is because, like I said, number one, off of memory from from a map that someone sent me. Number two, because they mentioned that apparently like Lannisters were like enemies there or some shit like that, and I know that the Lannisters, their Lannisport, I believe, is where they're from, and that's located in the west. Like I said, I'm just going off this mental map that I tried memorizing earlier today. But okay, so Lady Stark decides to take Tyrion over to her sisters in Eyrie. Now, like I said, they get attacked on the road, in which case Tyrion saves Lady Stark. Now, see, people have been hitting me up this past week talking about, "Oh, Larry, do you really think that Tyrion would intentionally try to kill Bran? And if he did intentionally try to kill him, do you think he'd be stupid enough to give the assassin his own dagger?" And it's like I said, I'm not saying that he was the one who necessarily did it, but I don't trust him either. He's a Lannister. I don't trust him. I can't. As like I said earlier, anyone who's outside of the Stark family, I got a hard time trusting them. They're outsiders. So I'm not. Yeah, and then not only that, but he's the smart one, and he's the one with a good mouth. He can talk his way out of a situation. So that's why I don't trust him. I have my eyes on him. But anyway, he does save Lady Stark, so that is worth mentioning. Honestly, if he had ill will intended towards her, he would have just let her get killed. And that's the truth. That's the truth. Why? Because when they were ambushed, I think only a handful of them escaped that ambush, including Lady Stark, her escort, one of the other noblemen that was with them, the one who was really good with a sword, which I have to applaud whoever came up with that choreography for this episode. That fight on the road was well choreographed. That guy was, there was the scene where he slashed the dude. Got up close to him, jabbed him in the throat, and then kicked off, and then turned around in time enough to catch the other guy. That was really good choreography. Anyway, so then they do get to Eyrie, which we get introduced to Lady Stark's sister, elder sister, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I'm just assuming because of how they look. Uh, but her sister, who is Jon Arryn's widow, a very weird lady. Number one, she's breastfeeding a boy who can walk on his own and complete full sentences. I'm sorry, but that's just weird. Not that I didn't mind the whole breastfeed. I mean, I like to see tit every now and then, but breastfeeding that was weird. That was very, very weird. Um, okay, so another thing worth noting when Lady Stark showed up and when she was talking with her sister about Tyrion, she mentioned, she was like, well, you sent me a message telling me to beware of the Lannisters. And her sister said, no, I told you to stay away from them, yet you bring one into my home. That's worth noting. Why? Because we're starting to see tension. That was an introduction into a possible conflict that we can see unfold between the two sisters later on in the series. And Tyrion winds up getting thrown into it's not really a dungeon. It's more of a large window sill. It's a giant opening in a tower. There's nothing out there but the open. No railing, no glass, no stone banister, nothing. Just the open. So yeah, stay away from the edge. Okay, so let's see. Now, I think now we can dwell into what's been going on with the three characters I mentioned earlier. So let's just start off with Ned, because Ned has been a busybody in this episode. Okay, number one, there was the tournament. The conversation with Ned and King Robert about, when Robert wanted to joust, and, that whole conversation. And we saw how Robert treats his squire like shit. I mean, yeah, the kid's a Lannister, and that's grounds enough for me not to like him. But, I mean, at the same time, he hasn't really done anything malicious yet, so why give the kid a hard time? But Robert's a dick. God, he's a dick. Anyway, so since the tournament, Ned is continuing his investigation with what happened with Jon Arryn, his last days. Apparently, we find out by the end of the episode that apparently Jon Arryn was identifying all of King Robert's bastard children. And they kept reiterating Jon Arryn's last words. And I believe they were, the seed is strong. Like I said, they're giving us breadcrumbs, but I'm trying to piece together exactly what that means. Because there's so many things that could mean. I get that. I really don't have much speculation. I mean, I can sit here and I can tell you, all the different conclusions I could come up with what that could possibly mean, but we still don't know enough. We still don't know enough. Like I said, they're giving us breadcrumbs at a time. We're not getting loaves. We're getting crumbs. Okay, so what else happened with Ned Stark? Like I said earlier when I mentioned Arya, she did warn Ned about what she heard. So that. But then there was the big falling out that Ned had with Robert. Robert learned of Daenerys, the fact that she was pregnant with Drogo's son. And he wholeheartedly knows the implications of what that could mean. And like I said, Robert, he is a dick, but I do understand where he was coming from. And him calling that meeting with the council members and with Ned and his whole stand on that, I mean, he was able to convince the other council members of the potential danger that this girl bears in her womb. I mean, It's one thing to have the Targaryens and the Dothraki, team up through marriage. It's a whole nother thing to have them team up through an heir. I mean, that's what it is. That's Drogo's heir. That's a blood bond. So there are major implications on that. But of course, Ned, he doesn't think that this is a threat. And if it is a threat, he's wholeheartedly prepared to meet them in battle. That is his thing. He's not concerned about that. But one thing he will not allow himself to do, which is what Robert kept insisting, is that they kill Daenerys. He won't do that. He won't kill a child. Gotta applaud Ned Stark for that. He will not do that. So, Ned, you're the man. But this leads to a big falling out where pretty much Ned resigns from his position as the king's hand. I saw this coming. I think we all saw this coming. Well, of course, you guys who read the book know it was coming. But I'm talking about guys, you all, guys and gals who are watching this, first impressions, just along with me, first time. I'm pretty sure we saw this coming because that tension between them two has been there since the first episode. So, okay, before I get to the conclusion of this episode, we also saw a conversation between Robert and Cersei, which tells us a lot about those characters and a lot about their relationship. I think it's pretty obvious now that their relationship is based off of obligation, and that's it. There is no tie to them other than obligation and their kid. Well, I mean, their kids is a branch from the bark of obligation. That's what that is, But there is no type of love. There isn't even lust. There's nothing there between those two, and you could see it. But another thing I will give Robert this. Robert's a broken man, and we saw that when he was talking about Ned's sister and the whole thing. Like, he is a broken man. I mean, like I said, for all of Robert's faults, I can forgive a broken man. So I can't really, I can't really condemn him for the way he acts. I mean, he's broken. So, okay, I'll go ahead and conclude this review with Starks versus Lannisters, round 1. It finally happened. Freaking Jamie found out that Tyrion was being held in Eyrie thanks to Lady Stark, and he got pissed. He rolled up to Littlefinger's pad where he knew Ned was, rolled up with a bunch of guys, and he pulled a sword out on Ned. I was like, whoa, hold up. You just pulled a sword out on Lord Stark. Like, you pull that sword, you better be ready to swing it. And man, first off, he murked Ned's boys. The two sword hands Ned had, he murked them. Then Ned's like second in command there, freaking stabbed the dude through the eye. And then of course him and Ned finally clashed sword, and I'm like, oh, round 1, ding 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 ding, ring the bell. It's time for round 1. But freaking one of his soldiers, freaking stabbed Ned in the back of the thigh with a freaking spear. Fucking cheat. That pissed me off. So I was like, I got mad. And like I said, before I took like an hour off before I went ahead and did this review because I was pissed. I was like, you fucking cheat. I was like, that's bigger bullshit when Miami had snuck 6 guys on the fucking court against Chicago in the game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals earlier. It's cheating. Niggas cheating. But yeah, Jamie had words with that guy. Fucking hit him in the face. Cause Jamie, Jamie's a prick, but at the same time, he understands, the whole, that was his fight. And this guy, you ended my fight. It's like, nah, I mean, to be honest, Jamie could have killed Ned and he would have been completely justified to do so. But if he would have killed him after that shit, nah, I mean, I think Jamie does have some sense of honor. I mean, shit, he is a knight of the realm. But who knows? I mean, he's also a Lannister, so. But, so yeah, so that's where this episode ended. Next week, though, they did show. Well, I'll save the preview. I won't mention the preview for next week. But what I will mention is that apparently HBO is releasing the 7th episode a week early. Next week, when episode 6 premieres, HBO, as soon as it's over, HBO will release episode 7 on HBO Go, which is free to all HBO subscribers. I am a subscriber, so I should be able to get it free. So will I do like a double review next week? Perhaps. I'm not sure. Part of me does want to save the episode 7 review for the week after next, so I can have something to upload that week. But who knows? I might go ahead and upload it early. I'm not sure. So that'll do it for me. I'll go ahead and I'll leave this video off. I know I kind of went. I'm pushing like 26 minutes. I'll go ahead and leave this off. Just want to take this time to thank you guys for watching. As always, comment, rate, subscribe. Thank you guys so much. If you guys don't know, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/otakuassemble. Also on Twitter, twitter.com/otakuassemble. So yeah, so I guess I'll just leave this video off. This is Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'll catch you guys next week. Later.